Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
Here we are, another episode of how we do our work, kind of picking that series back up. And everything so far has kind of been leading up to the thing that most devs think about, which is like doing the work, like building whatever it is that you were hired to build for the project. There's a bunch of different ways of doing that. I know I've experimented with many over the years. I know even you and I working together have kind of slowly refined a system, but I thought it might be useful to sort of share how we set that up. And then as each week progresses, kind of like what a normal week looks like for us.
Yeah, I think when I started working with you, you were just a crazy cowboy. And I said, settle down, Joel.
Yeah.
Let's get boring and put everything in the tickets.
That doesn't sound like me at all, but I will agree that the process has definitely been formalized when you have to coordinate with another dev. So we use GitHub for our source code. And so our ideal scenario and kind of what we settled on is also trying to use GitHub for work management. Now, that's not to say that other systems don't work, but I just kind of like having everything in one place. And so we make use of GitHub issues, GitHub milestones, GitHub projects. And honestly, it's pretty simple. Like there's this new, what is it called? Issues beta or something that it's almost like GitHub wants to be Jira. I opted into it on one of the repos and then promptly never used it. So like, this is just the vanilla kind of boring, simple way of doing stuff, but we'll walk through it.
And what you meant is it's new, or it's been here for 3 years, depending on when you're listening to this episode.
That's true. Okay. Yeah. Maybe it's been around for 30 years. Hello, time traveler. So where it starts is the issues. And so as you alluded to, we kind of write everything up as tasks. And generally speaking, I mean, sometimes the tasks will start out bigger. And then as we work them, we might decide, oh, this is kind of big. I'm going to split this into like 2 or 3 different tasks. But generally speaking, it's a unit of work. It's a feature. It's something that we're going to either do or deliver as part of executing the project. And for each issue, obviously we have a description of it, a title and a summary and any supporting documentation. But some of the important things we also like to do, or at least I do, I don't know if you care about this, Aaron, but I like to tag things with labels. On some projects, depending on how we work, we might even use like a size label, small, medium, large. It's not meant to convey hours of work or anything super granular, but just kind of like a rough sense, like, oh man, I don't have a lot of time today. I want to make some headway on this project. I'll grab a small one, or boy, I got a whole day ahead of me. I'm going to grab a large one. Just those sorts of things. And then there's a few buckets of labels that we assign to a task. Maybe something is a feature, maybe it's a bug, maybe it's documentation, maybe it needs design, maybe it's a setup task. Like, okay, let's deploy this to a fresh environment. So, but we don't go nuts with it. I think we use maybe a total of 7 or 8 different labels plus those size labels, and that's enough to kind of get a sense for like, what is this ticket, and helps categorize things later.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the tickets that we create, kind of depend on the client we have and how we want to communicate with them too. Yeah. So most clients want to know in general where something is in the pipeline, but they don't care so much about the details. And so we kind of adapt ourselves to that work too. So for example, if you have a client, it's like, what would you say to that client? And that you're working on, and that's the actual ticket. And then inside of there, you could put check boxes or whatever for more of the technical things. And so you might say this is in progress, and you start to check through the things that you're working on.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned clients, because I think we discussed this in an earlier episode, but this is a client-owned GitHub organization / repo. So they have visibility. Whether they use it or not, or care about it at all, is a different topic. But most of our clients, even some that were kind of non-technical, have expressed like, hey, that's kind of cool that I get updates, or that I can, if I have a bug, I don't have to call you or email you. I can just write up an issue, and I know you'll massage it a little bit to make it more technical or the way we need it to be for work, but it is collaboration, and it cuts down on a lot of unnecessary communication because it's that central point of truth.
Mm-hmm. I think also understanding that we own the labels and all they have to do is add in something just like real quick, because I've worked with like things like Jira too with complex workflows and then started noticing that my stakeholders won't use it anymore because it was like, well, to fill out this ticket, you have to check 27 different boxes. And they're like, I used to just be able to call you. It's like, well, don't, but also I understand that this is frustrating. So we try to keep that simpler for them and then we handle the rest of it.
Yeah. Very low friction. So let's just say we have all the issues kind of stubbed out for what we want to work on. Generally speaking, we'll organize those into a project. I think it's pretty rare for us to have more than one project in a repo. It has happened occasionally, but for the most part, we have like a single project we're working on in a repo. And we will bring the issues that we've created into that project. The project, if you've never seen them in GitHub, there's different ways of setting them up, but generally speaking, you kind of have different columns for, is this something we're going to do? Is this something we're currently working on? Is this something that needs review? And is this done? Kind of like the 4 basic columns. And then within the issues and the project, so the project is like a board you can look at and get a sense, okay, here's everything we've sort of committed to and is in the pipeline. But then we'll go a step further usually and also use a feature called milestones, which essentially are arbitrary buckets of deliverables. And so a lot of times we'll do it weekly. We'll just have week 1, week 2, week 3, based on the calendar year. And that gives an additional layer of like, oh, so there might be 30 things in this bucket for the month of whatever, but these 10 are going to be week 27. These 5 might be week 28. So it just kind of helps somebody to see a little more at a glance, whether that's us or the client. Here's the general flow we think things are going to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. One of the issues I ran into in the past was like trying to figure out how to use milestones, and everyone has their own sort of way of doing it. But just to double down and clarify, our big project that we're doing for the client is the project, and then the milestones are the steps to that project. Mm-hmm. So I've seen a lot of people use milestones for like features of a project. Okay. You can do that, but I think the whole time-based thing is better. Because although we don't bill per hour, people still care what's happening what week. Right. And so our experience has been it's just been easier to communicate to people looking at the week milestone saying this is what happened this week or whatever, versus saying like, well, we're 2/3 through releasing the feature of XYZ. And they're like, I don't know how long it's going to take or care.
Yeah. And I think part of how we settled on this use of milestones was based on some constraints in GitHub. In Jira, you have all sorts of date fields, due date, estimated time remaining, like all these different things. You don't really have that in GitHub. So we kind of settled on milestones being time-based because it gave us just sort of like a bucket of rough time, not specific due dates. And also, I know I do it this way. I think you do too. I kind of plan out weekly, right? So I sort of look ahead to what I'm going to work on this week, and just having that line up with the way things are configured in GitHub has been really useful.
There's one thing that me and you do that I found super useful with projects and stuff like this that maybe other people might run into too. So depending on our project, we might either be developing both at the same time, or one is handling more of the customer communication and signing off on sort of our feature work, and the other person may be doing more of the programming. So one of the things that we'll do is, let's just say who's developing this tool, this feature, this ticket, they'll move it through the columns, and when it's done, they'll put it in a done column, but still leave the ticket open. And then the person who is signing off on it, or like merging in pull requests or whatever, they'll see stuff in the done column. And then when they agree it's good to go, then they will close the ticket. They'll still remain in the done column, but it'll be a different, have a different checkbox or whatever like that. And so that's been really nice because we can say like, yeah, I've finished this. It's ready for you, Joel, to take a look at. And then when it's done, you merge it in, close the ticket, it's good to go. And we still have a nice listing of stuff that we've completed. And then that kind of leads into how you give updates to the client.
Yeah. That's kind of where my mind was going next. So we generally communicate weekly with a client. I know some teams have like daily stand-ups and things like that. I try to minimize those formal meetings, especially real-time meetings when you're on a phone call or on a Zoom meeting or something like that. But we'll do it once a week. And generally it's over email. Here's what we did last week. Here's what we're going to work on this week. And maybe here's something that's blocking us, something that requires special attention or outside input to help us keep moving. But we can just look at the GitHub board to be like, okay, what did we do last week? As long as everything is captured there, it makes it really easy to send those updates.
I wanted to just a tiny little aside from my background as being a development manager. I've done a lot of daily stand-ups, and I tell you, I never really liked them, but I had to do them for 2 reasons. And then when I tell you these 2 reasons, maybe it can help you not have to go to them if you're a developer.
Okay.
One is just the culture of the organization, where I would get pinged or asked multiple times a week on the status of certain things. And that was partly my fault for not setting expectations right. And that's partly just the culture of the company, and that can only change so fast. So sometimes it's a little beyond what you can, yeah, it's great, but I need to know these things because someone's asking me every day. And then 2, the larger reason I've ran into this many times is developers don't like messing with tickets. They don't like updating them and, like making good commit messages and all that kind of stuff. When you don't do that, then I have to have a meeting with you.
Right.
So if you don't want to have a daily stand-up meeting, write better tickets, keep your tickets up to date before you leave for the day or before you're done, update your ticket. That way, when I know I can finally trust those, then I'm going to stop wanting to have meetings with you because I just want you to work.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of looking at it. And one other thing to mention, just as long as we're talking about meetings. So with the weekly check-ins, generally it's over email, but it is good to still have kind of that either face-to-face or real-time communication. So what we usually do is once a month, we'll have a monthly planning meeting with the client. And that's where we can kind of set the goals for that month, set the priorities, and kind of figure out what's a reasonable amount of work to do.
It's best to do it around the time when they're going to be paying you too. So if they don't pay you, they have to face you.
Ooh, I like that. The house I live in was built in the 1970s. And apparently a thing people did in that time period was, instead of just putting a doorbell on the front of their house, they also put in an intercom system. So like, if you want that experience of living in an apartment building, but you have a house, I guess this is one way of doing it. So when we moved in, the intercom system was already gone. But I was recently doing some work in the basement, and I could see all these wires that appeared to go nowhere. And I figured out these were for that old intercom system. So there was one going to the front door. There was one going to like the kitchen. There was one going all the way up to like the upstairs bedroom. And I'm like, that's kind of dumb. Like, if the doorbell rings, this house isn't so big that you couldn't just walk to the doorbell, open the door, and talk to the person, right? It seemed like kind of a stupid idea. I should probably add that the thing I was doing in the basement was running wire to like one of these new video doorbells that I bought. And this was a whole ordeal in itself because I'm not really good with electricity, like despite my family thinking because I work on computers, I understand electricity. I don't know how that works, but
I just want to follow your logic real quick though.
Okay. Right.
The house is not too big, so you don't need an intercom, but it's too big to just look out the window.
Yes, it is too big for that.
Okay, yeah. So that's why you need the video doorbell.
And the video doorbell is like also a camera, so it gives like there's other security benefits to it. But
yeah,
yes.
that Windows would not provide. Yeah, I understood.
Got it. So I finally got all of the stuff figured out with the doorbell. The doorbell's working. I was testing it out with my son, and one of the features of this is a 2-way radio. And I'm like, crap! I just put another intercom in my house. I was making fun of these people from the 1970s installing intercoms, and I basically just installed a fancy intercom.
Everything just goes in cycles.
Yep.
Here is where I would say something funny and possibly pithy.
And that would make you want to visit masteringLaravel.io, which is full of all sorts of Laravel goodness.